Right, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome along to the Virgin Atlantic presentation. Hope you all enjoyed the keynote this morning, and hope you enjoyed our boarding music, which we played just as you came in. So today, I'm going to take you through our Tableau journey, and the aim of the presentation today is to really give you some little takeaway tips that you can actually jot down, take photos of, and just take away and do in your own organizations. Because the biggest challenge we had at Virgin was that we didn't have any resource to actually provide like a centre of excellence, so I had to kind of do it myself. So that's what we're going to take you through today. So to introduce myself, I'm Tom Barber, and I manage the data product function at Virgin Atlantic, which sits within the data and insights team. So although the focus is a lot more on data engineering, I have used Tableau for quite a few years, so I look after the application side of things as well. So a little bit about me and my kind of social life as well. So in my spare time, I love to go traveling, working for an airline. You kind of have to. And I also DJ on the side and have done for 10 years. So I do some pretty big clubs in the UK. And I also combine work and play by DJing the Pride events that Virgin Atlantic sponsor. So I did Brighton Pride this year down on the south coast, as well as London as well. So that's a little bit about me. My data life though, started in 2011 at EasyJet. I'd done a couple of jobs before that, but really this is where I started the more data-focused stuff. So 2011 at EasyJet, worked in the revenue management function there, and then moved on to get introduced to Tableau by a chap called Paul Chapman, who some of you may be aware of. He's presenting here. He does quite a lot in the Tableau community, runs the Tableau user group. So Paul introduced me to this tool, and I was a bit skeptical. At that time, I was very hot with Excel, very good with SQL Server, and using tools like SSIS and creating data processes and visualizations that way. So I was a bit unsure with this, but Paul encouraged me to go onto a course run by one of our partners, the Information Lab. And from there, I started trying to integrate Tableau into what we do. So spent 5 years at EasyJet, and then I got poached to join Virgin Atlantic. Virgin Atlantic was one of those carriers that I've always wanted to work for. I'm a bit of an airline geek, so really wanted to do that. And I started in the revenue management team there, and looking at all of our revenue management insights. So that then brings me to here, and to take you through the story today. So for those that aren't aware, just take you really briefly through a bit about Virgin Atlantic. We have 49 wide-body aircraft, which is just airline code for big. We have various types, from the iconic jumbo jet to the brand new Dreamliners, and we're going to be getting the Airbus 350 next year, which is really exciting. We fly directly to 33 destinations, primarily in the USA and, as you can see, around Africa and Asia, so all long-haul destinations. And because we're a relatively small airline, what we do is we utilize some code shares with some partners and a joint venture agreement with our friends at Delta to extend our reach and provide more destinations for our customers. So I flew into Atlanta with Virgin and then down to here with Delta, which was great. We have about 8.9 thousand employees, most of which are crew and pilots, as with most airlines. But we have about 2,000 in our head office functions, so that's the kind of scale of the kind of people that we have to provide good data and good analytics for. So with all of that, this brings us on to our actual story of how Tableau took off at Virgin Atlantic. So this will be hopefully quite a common thing for a lot of organizations. It was common at EasyJet, it was common at stuff before that. So our data was all in silos. So we had our decision makers asking questions of our analysts, and our analysts providing data answers to our decision makers, but they were getting data from everywhere. So we had data in Oracle databases scattered around the business for various different categories of data. We also had some stuff stored online, web-based, where some of our analysts had to literally go onto a web GUI and download the data every day. There was no automation in that. And a lot of this was duplicated across different silos, depending on who built it and when. So analysts would go to their favored data source, or the one they felt most comfortable with, or the one they've been brought up on. And it was they'd just take it from everywhere. So analysts would be generating their Excel reports from this, primarily in Excel, and maybe some of them would actually create their own little data warehouses in Access databases. And then they'd be firing all of these Excel sheets over by email, primarily to our decision makers. This is the kind of data that we were using, probably familiar to a lot of organizations. This is the kind of information our decision makers were getting. As you can see, it's not great. It takes a lot of effort to find the answers you need in that data, and a lot of manual effort to actually build it in the first place. So some of our analysts also got a little bit more entrepreneurial. So they'd be putting these into maybe filtered slide decks, like maybe just filtering that data, one for each region, for example, and then sending that over to our decision makers. They might even do it as PDFs as well, just because they think that actually looks smarter, which it does. But the end result of that is our decision makers just got bombarded by email from loads of different sources, and it is just not great. So that was our life before Tableau. Let's just go on. So how did we start to chip away at that? Now, all of this is before I joined. So early 2016, the Revenue Management Insights function were the ones that introduced Alteryx, because the idea there was that actually we could sort of semi-productionize some of these frustrating data pools and combination and transformation. So Alteryx was brought in to service that middle section. So the analysts would create their Alteryx workflows, join the data together, transform it, prepare it, but then it still resulted in spitting out all of that stuff to decision makers, because they were just generating Excel spreadsheets, and they're just making that little bit in the middle a little bit easier. So we came on to mid-2016 when Tableau was introduced to Virgin Atlantic by the same team, because then it was seen as, well, okay, we've got our data, so how can we now share it in a more interactive way and a more visually appealing way with our stakeholders? So we then got to the point where desktop was used for report creation, and server was then used to present that information up to the stakeholders. The trouble we had is that with very little training, our analysts were just building a report that just looked like the Excel report with a couple of filters, a little bit of conditional formatting still on there, but again, it's not the best. You can still interact with it by changing filters, but it's still not amazing. So following that, I kind of joined Virgin to look at how we can start to chip away at that, because the problem we had is this slide is just to show the kind of bad practice that our analysts got into just through not having much training or standardization. I can never say that word. So what was happening every day, every report, every bit of interaction, our analysts would open the workflow in Alteryx that they've made, they'd run that workflow, then they'd open a workbook in Tableau Desktop, they would refresh the data source because the Alteryx had generated that data source, and then they would save the workbook, then publish it to server, and then email notification to their stakeholders to say it was on server, which at the time they thought that was revolutionary. And I guess in a way it kind of was, because it was still better than the past. But the problem you have is every single one of those steps takes a little bit of manual effort and takes time. So when I joined in late 2016, it was really, how do I start to chip away at that? Whilst doing the normal day job, which I was responsible for creating the insights and the data processes around our inventory management function. But I had to work out how I could actually start to use a lot of the good stuff we did at EasyJet, where we had a full team to do a centre of excellence, but just do it with myself and just do it almost in my spare time and chip away at it. So these next few slides take you through some of those steps that I was talking about earlier, so feel free to kind of grab any of these ideas and take them away with you. So I just basically took all of the stuff that I learned at EasyJet and started working out what I thought was the best thing to do in a kind of priority order, the things that were going to make the biggest impact first. So the first thing I did was to think, right, well, we need some standards. Like, these reports are all going out completely messy. There's no brand feel about them. They're all looking a bit horrible. So I went about and created a standards document. So to get a standards document, one of the best places to look if you want your brand colours is we're lucky enough to have a brands template. So I went onto the intranet, grabbed our internal brand guidelines, and started to look through there, because that's going to tell you what your standard colours are, what your standard fonts are, and what they use for the marketing externally. So if you can do that internally as well, perfect. And then also actually looked on our website itself, because on our website, that's obviously branded for a customer look and feel. So we can get our category colours for things like our cabins, because we've got our red there for economy and a nice purple for upper class. So using a screen picker tool in Tableau, I could just literally drop that, get the RGB values of that, and then add that into the standards. So the analysts knew that whenever they're analysing upper class, they use that as the colour. And then I created just a really simple PDF document of all of these colours and standards just to share on our intranet, which does seem a little bit, I guess in a way, a little bit antique, because you still have to look through a document, read it, but at least it gave some kind of reference point for our analysts to look at and start to see that things can look a lot nicer. So that was the standards, and that was great. That went out there, people started doing it, but there was still a lot of manual effort. And they found it annoying looking through a whole massive document. So what I'd done as a quick win almost was to just create a one-pager that just showed a summary of everything that people can do, just to almost with the idea that they could literally have that as a laminate on their desktop. So that was kind of great, but actually the real win is then when you can just, instead of analysts having to create that themselves, why not give them a pre-made Tableau workbook? Sounds simple, but let's create them a workbook that already has these standards embedded in. It has the header and footer. It has the lines in. People actually creating lines in Tableau Desktop is quite frustrating. And create them a template that already has a couple of zones where they can drop their analysis in. I think the resolution on there's a little bit, you can't quite see the zones on there, but we'll show it in a little bit later. So we created a pre-made workbook that they use that as a starting point every time they open Tableau Desktop, and then they go from there rather than create it themselves. But that wasn't good enough for me, so I started to look around and thought, well, we've got this tool, how can I integrate these standards within the tool itself? So a lot of these things some of you may have seen, but we thought, well, we'll add the custom color palette to the preferences file so that the colors actually come up in Tableau Desktop itself in categories that we recognize, and we can push that out to all of our users using our friends in IT. So we just got simple virgin colors added to the drop-down just to really embed those parts. And to do that, there's a link there if any of you want to look into that. And I'm not going to pretend to even make that I've done all this stuff myself. I'm very good at Googling, so managed to find these help articles, and it's more just having the idea and going out and finding it on Google. So yeah, literally just add them into the preferences file. Really easy to do. Save that preferences file off, and they'll pop up in desktop. So the next thing to integrate standards was, well, we've got some nice flashy shapes, as you've seen in this some of these presentations. So let's integrate the shapes in. Again, very simple. There's Tableau's help pages have got that in there. Just add our corporate shapes in there, so if people are trying to make something a little bit more infographic, they can use those as well. And then the final real eureka moment for me was, well, there's a little space in the bottom of Tableau Desktop that I think, well, all the Tableau people close your ears, but I think it's a little bit pointless, the sample workbooks. And can I actually replace those with something a bit more useful for our analysts? So what I did was another bit of Googling and found out that we can save our Tableau workbooks themselves, our templates, and actually surface them in the sample workbook area. So with a bit of Googling again, edit one of these, this sample.manifest file, and I think it's the disclaimer is I don't think this is supported, so don't hurt me for that. But all you need to do is just do some simple editing of that file to change a few of the things like where the workbook's saved, what you want the caption to be when someone hovers over, and what you want the actual sample workbook to be called when they open it in desktop. And even down to the tooltip. And then the real cool thing about that is then we can also define little images, what those, so it makes it look a little bit more branded. So now when an analyst opens Tableau Desktop, they get that, which is a lot better. So now if they want to create a new report for Virgin Atlantic, they'll just click on that icon there. They've got one for our JV, if they're doing JV reporting, which will combine it with the Delta logos. And that means they open Tableau Desktop, just quickly click one of those, and they've already got the thing. So the link to that article is at the bottom there. It's got a guy called Ben Moss who created that. So yeah, feel free to take a look at that. I think that was a real winner to actually get these templates used more by our analysts. So that was our embedding standards in Tableau. And then finally was to look at creating easy-to-use data sources. Now, there's so much you can do with a data source in Tableau Desktop when you create extracts or live connections. So we looked at how we could actually make those easier. So can we start to categorize some of our areas? So can we put all our airport information in one folder? Can we start to set default values for some of the fields so that the colors are automatically brought up when you drag something onto one of the mark types? Can we put a default aggregation for something like our average, the average number of seats on a plane? That should be an average rather than a sum. So can we do things like that? So what we went away to do was to create some categorized data sources almost. So we use folders where to indicate where fields could be joined to other data sources. Just as you see there, categorizing the airport information. And then even silly things like just putting the definitions in the default properties on the comments to be able to actually tell a user what that field means. Obviously, there's a lot more high-end things that you can do with that, but this was a real quick way of surfacing that information. So the next thing was to think about how we could actually upskill our users a little bit. So again, we didn't have a massive resource to send people out there and train users. I didn't have the time to spend days training our users. So we looked at how we could use off-the-shelf training and just customize it a little bit, just to make it a little bit more virgin. So we went out to our partners at the Information Lab who run a one-day Tableau Essentials course in London. Might be a bit far for some of you guys, but they've started some online ones as well. So we approached them and actually said, well, would you be up for coming in on site and doing that for us? And let us just add a little module on the end, which one of my team can go in and just teach people a little bit about the common data transformations we have. So we connect to very specific data sources, and we have some specific issues, our own production process, and our own procedures around accessing the server. So that was a really quick thing that helped us out. So we then did the classic. We set up some Tableau and Alteryx user groups, and the thing with these was to make sure that I moved them over to be user-led rather than me running them every time. So I run the first couple, and then you just sort of divvy the work up among the other users, not losers. So we just did those one per month, led by a user in the business, and they were just responsible for kind of sourcing the content, and it was just created as a nice little, just a bit of an open discussion more than a really structured presentation, like a presentation at the start from a show and tell of something that someone's done, followed by half an hour like networking style lunch, just chatting to each other. So we used a tool that we have internally called Confluence, which is basically just like a Wikipedia site, to create some really quick documentation around how to access server, how to do various operations, quick how-to guides, link like almost signposting to some of those tutorials, and on there we also got our users to surface up like how to use reports, how to the user guides that you could actually surface to the business. So that gave us a great opportunity again. So we have our report overviews where users can literally just type in and add pictures. They could even add a video in there if they wanted to. And then this is where my next eureka moment came, because I thought, well, Tableau Desktop can take websites. You can embed websites into Tableau. So why don't we add to our template the ability to actually surface this within Tableau Desktop itself or on server? So with another load of Googling around how to get rid of a lot of the gumph around this, so like the menu on the left and various other bits, I worked out that we could now add it into our Tableau server, so that now when a user clicks on the last tab of a workbook, they now get a nice, neat user guide that is being powered by our Wikipedia style page, but to the user they just think it's Tableau. They just think it's in there. And they can just click through the different options, drop downs, and just see how to use the report itself. And because we've got the template, it then means that our decision makers, our stakeholders, they kind of know that they can now, there's always going to be that last little page if it's a production report that's going to have this information in. And although we don't have any standards or rules about what has to be in there, it's kind of down to the users, because if the users don't put enough information in there, they're going to get more questions from their report users. So it's a bit of a trade-off and an encouragement for them to do it. But that really does look slick, and I kind of wish I could have shown you, but it's our VPN and our connections to the UK are just not happening here. So, which means I don't have to do work all week, which is great. So, So the admin of all of this can be quite a pain. So really my attitude on this is just share the load and automate where we can. So the first thing is our friends in IT are great at owning the initial access. So we get them to handle everything around actually getting the user on server itself, and all of the procedures around that, because that's just stuff that we don't really need to worry about. So we use ServiceNow at Virgin Atlantic, so we just have a simple form where they can just go in and just the users just go in and request the access. It all goes through the approval channels via the line manager, and then it's just automatically added by AD group synchronization. So we just have a series of AD groups that set up a really basic access level for each major area of the business, and then and that just gives surface up like our revenue management users just some base level access to the core things they need, and then we look to our Tableau champions that we recruited from across the business to help us out further with that. So they're responsible for the approval of the requests that come through to actually get onto server, and the requests are routed based on which area of the business it's come from. They maintain local user groups, so they take those wider AD groups and they split them down a little bit more based on the needs of their area of the business. And we have a rule at Virgin where it is just, there's no individual users on any report or any project, so everything has to be in a group. It just keeps it it satisfies my OCD, which is amazing. And then they do some periodic checking of production reports, and we're looking into ways that we can potentially automate some of that and give them some tools that they can use to actually check that automatically rather than manually. And we kind of have 1 to 2 users per major business area. So a major business area for us is probably around 50 to 100 users. And we find that works because a lot of those users are doing very common tasks. They all need a similar kind of level of access, like an entire inventory management function or entire pricing function. And they are great organization, basically. So what we're saying is we don't need our Tableau champions to be really good with Tableau. We just need people that are really good at organizing things, because actually these people aren't necessarily the same people that are going to be using desktop, because they are happily just sitting there on server and organizing things. We have other means of getting our desktop community help with things. So our Tableau champions actually just kind of keep our server up and running and keep it ticking over. So yeah, as I said, not necessarily a desktop user. And then all I do is just me or one of my team have a regular catch-up session with these Tableau champions just to make sure everything is okay and let them know of anything that's happening, like upgrades, new features, that kind of stuff that's going to affect them. So the next bit was really to get creative with the admin views. So the standard admin views on Tableau Server are good, but we thought one of the quick ways to kind of give our desktop users something different to work on rather than business data, and B, just to make it that little bit more custom to what we want to do, was to surface up a couple of data sources onto server, which is from the Tableau Postgres database, so we can start to create some nice admin views that kind of fit our individual use cases of what we're actually trying to see. And obviously there's a lot of things blanked out on there because just to make sure that we don't show it all. So so we just created a couple of user views, and now it means that because those data sources are on server, our Tableau Desktop users can create their own if they feel that they have a specific need to. So really the summary of all that was to take a lot of small initiatives over time but result in a bigger change of adoption, because now we have gone from that Excel, just a lot of lines of Excel through these points of doing standards, training, automation, and sharing workload into reports that look a lot more consistent. And oh, pardon me, gee, that's a bit loud. Yeah, we've gone through all of that, and it's given us the opportunity to really get a nice, consistent feel to our Tableau server. So every report in production just looks and feels right. So pardon me, I'll just have a quick. So the next steps for us really is to start to take that on a bit and really start to bed this down a lot more. So over the next, maybe the next year, I'd say, we're looking at potentially moving our Tableau server into the cloud and look at some of the extensibility things we can do. So maybe create a portal where we can surface up Tableau server reports for users rather than using the server interface itself. We're still way behind when it comes to using Tableau mobile, which is a massive frustration of mine, and it's no fault of Tableau. It's more just trying to sort out our IT processes to allow us to make it happen. And the other big thing that I think we can really take advantage of is to utilize our HR systems. Because one data source that is really, really good at Virgin Atlantic is our HR database. So my thinking around that is, can we start to use the hierarchies of user to department to major area to firstly enhance our usage reports so we can see usage by department, if you join those two data sources together. And also, can we do something clever around actually surfacing up this data to be able to create local groups themselves on the server. So we have a local group for a department, so it makes it easier for our Tableau champions because they don't have to maintain groups for like a call center function that has people moving in and out of it almost daily. And then they can just like deal with the groups further down. So that's really where like the next steps for us. Also depending on some of the features that are announced this week, that might all change. But I think they kind of stick to what we're trying to achieve really with to automate where we can and make it as easy to access as possible. So the bit that I always hate is to take you through actually how quickly we can use all this stuff to create a production-ready report that will be ready to go on our server. And yeah, great. So if I'll just, hopefully this will work. So if I do that, oh, there we go. That's the first good step. So as you can see here, this is a live version of Tableau Desktop. And we have our sample workbook things here that I showed you earlier. So I'm just going to select this offline one because then it doesn't require a connection to our Tableau server. And this bit here is going to blank out because it's, again, it can't connect to our server. But what we normally have in our template here is a link to our Wikipedia-style page that just tells people how to use the template itself. Just silly little things like that just help out and give them a bit of a richer environment. And then in this template we have various different common layouts. Like one down the end here, PowerPoint with no header for those people that want to just export the image and put it in between our standard corporate level PowerPoints within the bounds of it. And then as you can see here, they've just got little sections just to where they can literally just connect the data and drop it in. So what we're going to do is just here's one that's already connected to some data. So what I'm going to do is just create a really quick report of maybe like our year-on-year capacity change over a year. And all this data is anonymous, so feel free to take snaps, it's fine. So what I have here is a couple of data sources, and I'm hoping these work. So if they don't, just bear with me. So as I said before, we've made some common data sources that sit on our Tableau server. I've extracted them for now just because I don't want to risk any kind of live connections. And we've done things like added groupings for our capacity. So capacity is just the number of seats on a plane that are available to sell, basically. So we've added calculations like calculate the year over year, calculate the prior year, the current year. So if I just do something like just add the capacity year over year, sorry, I always do that, put it on there, because I want to make a little bar chart over time, so do a departure date for month, year, and I'm actually going to put that as a bar chart. And then if I put my year over year, this is using the default properties of color, which we've embedded in the data source, pop that on color, and then that's already put your the analyst doesn't have to worry about the colour scheme on that because that will give you your positive, negative. And then, so I'm going to call that my capacity chart. And I'm just going to, that's fine. And then one of the things that's quite common in an airline is people love to make route maps. The benefit we have of an airline is that we're quite geographical, so we can do maps, which is always visually exciting. So what we've done here is, as I said, we've got our join fields. So for this, I'm just going to make sure, I'm just going to add business region into detail just to make sure that, when I need to filter on that, I can. And we've already set these up to be geocoded correctly. But the real thing that we kind of came up with in one of our little user group sessions and hackathons was it's not the easiest thing sometimes to work out how to make a route map, so you might have to go and Google it, but can we make the actual data source teach the user how to make a route map? And the answer is yes. And I mean, I could probably get one of you up here to try and do it, but we haven't, yeah, let's just make sure I'll probably mess it up anyway. But what we can do is all of these have been set up so that the default properties are all set up to work. So here you can see step 1 is just double-click latitude. Step 2 is double-click longitude. And then here it says path ID, double-click, because we know that Tableau Server will automatically double-click that or put it where we want it to be. And then it says here, the step 4, I can't really do anything with that, so I've actually just change mark type to line. So change mark type to line. And then path order, place on path. And then line color, place on color, just so we get the standard line color. So there you have it's not the prettiest route map, but that gives an analyst a basic route map just out of the box from a data source. And as you can see there, you could potentially build that in seconds. So I'm just going to make this look a little bit more fancy. So I'm just going to make a dual axis route map so we can see our airports as well. So hopefully I will do this right. So I've got our point color here. And then I'm just going to dual axis this. There we go. And I'll put our airport name, airport IDs onto label on there. Just make it look a bit nicer. And just to save a bit of time, I'm going to make a nice little tooltip on here. Hopefully I won't mess this up. Don't want all that. There we go. So now we get a nice little route map, which always looks great. So there's our route map. So then we thought we could do a similar thing with a common thing that users try and do, which is like using buttons as filters. This one was a little bit harder to work out how to do, but so there's a lot of steps on how to do the first step of it. So we just utilize the default properties of the comments to basically give them more instructions if they hovered over. So places average on columns, right click on axis and reduce range 0 to 1, and right click on axis and click show header. So if you remember all that. So we do that. No, we don't. Sorry, that's I didn't even read my own instructions, did I? So put it on there as average. Fine. Edit axis, do that for 1. Get rid of that. Right, so this is our 1 button, and then we're going to do business region, drag on rows, right click and hide. So drag on rows, right click, it should actually say show header, not hide. And then button color, drag on color. Oh, I didn't do label, drag on label, fine. And then hide tooltip, because we don't want the tooltip. No one wants that. So now we've got a nice little selection of little buttons. Oh, thank you very much. Been plagued by flu, so no one come near me. It's really not attractive, is it? Don't go on long-haul flights. So actually do, if you're going on Virgin. Just realised what I said there. Cool, so I've got our buttons. Great. So now, hopefully, if I've done everything correctly, I should be able to now just say, got my standard template here. So I want to say, right, let's put the capacity in there. Get rid of that. It's always annoying it does that as well. And I want to put my buttons down here, and then put my route map here. And then actually, because this is containered up really well, and we've used containers to make this really solid, what the analysts know they can do is select layout container, and they actually want this on the top. So we'll just do that. There we go. And then I'm just going to use the buttons as I always lose the use. They've kind of moved where the user's filter is, isn't it? Yeah, okay. And now this is where I always get it wrong. Got to try and remember why I need to do that. Let me just dashboard actions. Yeah, it's fun. I've left out business region on one of the details. That's the issue. So Let's just pass over that one for now, because I'm not going to try and debug it now, but effectively you could pretty quickly get that working. And now all the analyst needs to do is change their report name, and if they have any filters, just pop them in there, and then that is ready to publish to server. And once they've sorted out the actions, obviously. So as you see there was a lot of talking going through that, but if you done that out of the box and you kind of knew what you were doing and didn't have the sniffles, you could probably do that in a couple of minutes. So that's where we've got to, from taking it from right away from the Excel all the way through to now being able to do things like this really quickly. And as you can imagine, this is the kind of data source that I can sort of share. Capacity is quite generic, but we've got data sources for our competitors, all that kind of stuff. So we can start to, we could overlay our competitor analysis onto here. We could, color the route by, we could size the route map. We could do loads of different things just by adding data sources, and hopefully making the actions work. So yeah, that's all for that demo. So if we could just swap over. Oh no, I've got to swap over, haven't I? So we are on 5. Cool. So with that, that's kind of all I had to take you through. We do have 10 or so minutes for some questions. So I think we have some helpers who have roving mics if anyone would like to ask anything. But I will try and answer where I can.
So I loved your idea about the Tableau champions. How did you go about recruiting those and identifying those within the different business divisions?
I think it was, so the first thing we did was a really simple, just an email call out to basically go to the line managers and just say, this is what we're going to do. Are you okay with this? And then see if they could identify anyone, because the line managers know their team well. So they will be, they'll be able to identify the kind of traits we're looking for. And as I say, the main trait we were looking for was organizational skills. And obviously if they use Server itself, that's even better. And then really, then it was just a general call out to the Tableau Server user base just to say, this is the role profile and this is anybody interested? And we got quite a lot of interest, so it was good, really. I think people were keen. They'd seen that it was a bit of a mess, so they wanted to. There's quite a lot of people that had ideas of how to clean it up, and they're the people we wanted to tack.
I'm sorry. So when you first switched from giving the business decision makers Excel spreadsheets that they've been used to seeing for potentially quite a while, like how did you get them used to seeing the new visualizations, and like what were the tools to like get them interested in seeing something new versus just what they'd always had?
Yeah, I think it's a good one. I should really add that to the deck actually. So the thing that it was similar at my previous roles as well, is you found that those Excel spreadsheets, if you actually sit with the stakeholder, or you get one of your users to sit with the stakeholder, or you coach your team in that way, then you can actually get out of them what they're trying to look for in that data. And a lot of the time it's which route is performing worst in this period of time, or which route has got problems for X, Y, Z. And the minute you can start to almost sit side by side with that and say, well, instead of having that, like show me how you would find that information, and then like this is how I would show you that information using these data sources, because we can quickly just drag on like our load factor, for example, and then just sort it and give them the top 5, and then that's instantly giving them the top 5. And when we put that in our actual production reports, like all of our reports will have some form of this is like the highlight section of the things you need to look at, and the minute you can start preempting their questions, which a good analyst can do, we found that was the kind of turning point. And it's fair to say a lot of them like the tables. They do love a table, but we added a few little things where they could just export the data if they wanted to, but they soon found that they had the information they need. But it is a difficult one, and there are people that won't change, so you do sometimes just have to serve them with that information in that format if they need it, but sometimes Tableau might not necessarily be the best way. for that specific use case.
You talked about how cloud was on your roadmap. Could you just talk about how you're approaching that? Are you, is it Tableau Online? Are you moving the server to AWS or Azure?
So I think with the clouds, we'll be looking at, probably won't be doing online. We'll look at, we use Azure for a lot of our data operations. So I think we'll look at putting it into Azure. And honestly, that's about as far as we've got. It's just working out how to go that next step and working out what help we need to get there. So yeah, and when we can actually do it really, because it all takes time and admin to get that kind of stuff sorted out. Anything else?
Maybe I missed it, but how did you create the access user request form? And second question, what's your DJ name?
Oh, good question. So I'll tackle the second one first because that's a quick one. So I don't actually have one. I do a lot of events where you're not actually the main attraction, which is swings and roundabouts. But yeah, so I just call myself. So yeah, that's, unfortunately, I work with a lot of drag queens, so they take all the limelight. They use the names. So the other bit around the access, that's out the box. Well, it's ServiceNow that we use, and we were just lucky to have that ability, and that's just customizable in that way. So you just work with the configuration people that know ServiceNow, and they change that form, and you make it an item on there. So it's quite lucky in that sense. Yep. Where's the microphone gone? Did it run away? Oh, sorry.
On your sample workbooks, how did you make those fields with the instructions in them? And
on those fields. Actually, I can probably just quickly show you that. Is that 5? Which one is? No, it's 1. Sorry. It's like 6 different options down here. I'm not very good at keeping up. So on here, you can actually go into. I'm trying to think of the best example. That bottom one. So in here, you've got default properties. So that's the way of actually embedding a lot of the stuff in there. So we can embed the comment like that. But actually, all these are where the field exists. We just rename it to have like 2 dot. We just rename the actual field itself with the instruction number. Or if you find that you need the field more than once, then you can just literally duplicate it and then rename it as the next instruction. And then we just grouped it up into a folder, which you can do in here. So group by folder instead of group by data source. So yeah, that's all right. We need 5.
How did you?
I kind of just said, where are we?
Back here.
Over here. Oh yeah, cool. Sorry.
How did you manage the training and adoption on the user end? I know you talked about figuring out what their question is or where they're trying to get to, but is there anything else you did?
I suppose the advantage we had, I think, is because everything was so. I mean, I could use the word archaic, really. Users were really excited to be able to see like a new flashy tool like this. So the encouragement to get them actually on training courses was not that hard to do. And the fact you could, let them know that there's going to be a training course with lunch in the office that they don't have to travel to. The line managers don't need to, send them out all the expenses and that kind of thing. They just literally need to turn up in a room. They'll be trained, and they'll be trained in the way that we want them to be. That was fine, and then it's really after that point, it's encouraging them to be able to Google things really, and it's just so easy to find the information if you give it a Google. So yeah, I'd like to say we had a problem, but we didn't really, so I was quite lucky. So yeah, sorry, it wasn't the best answer, but we were fortunate.
Hi. How is PowerPoint still used among the analysts? If they're using these templates to create, new reports, are each of those living on within the server environment, or is it just for a couple slides to share to executives?
Yeah, I think it's more in that executive level presentation. So the best example is our weekly commercial update report. Like we've tried all we can to basically have all of that sitting on Tableau Server and filterable. But there's always that use case where the execs just want it as a PDF on their phone. So all the analyst needs to do now is just export that as a PDF, and it'll be there. And that's the real use case of that. And that's why Tableau Mobile is so important to me, really, because that should take out that requirement, because the only reason they want it on their phone as a PDF is because they're on the move and they don't want it, they can't access our internal network to view something on Tableau Server. So they just want the static version on their phone, like when they wake up in the morning or when they're on the train and things. So that seems to be the only use case of proper PowerPoint or PDF as it is now.
Success in this area using, looking at the consumer level data or the sales kind of data is enabling you to look at other parts of the business like safety data or maintenance data, that sort of thing, or if that's a challenge in how you kind of bridge out beyond the kind of data that you're looking at, or if you are already.
Yeah, I think it's, obviously all this data is properly productionized, but I suppose with the training, we are now encouraging our analysts to join in other parts of the business, and the whole beauty of this is because you're chipping away at the standardization, you can almost give a pack out. So the example of that is early last year, we got our cargo team starting to use the environment, and all it took was to take them through basically this and say, this is how you make it work. And just cherry pick a couple of users that you kind of mentor to be the more super user and sort of lead it. And we use our partners at the Information Lab. They provide some of that level consultant that can just come in and work with the team for 3 months and just try and take them up a level, and then they work from there basically, which is great. So yeah, it's been good.
How do you integrate Alteryx with Tableau?
So at the moment, a lot of the reporting teams are literally just generating Tableau data extracts, publishing it up to server, using the Publish to Server app in Alteryx. As I said previously, they were doing it using just outputting a TDE and then just opening the workbook on top of that in the local location. But then we sort of encouraged to use server more. It's safe to say what we're trying to do with Alteryx at the moment is to move less into the data preparation and move it more into its the geocoding and the statistical analysis and that kind of stuff, where the real power is. Because we found a lot of our analysts were just using Alteryx for common data preparation tasks like pivoting and just renaming fields and that kind of stuff. So yeah, we're just trying to tweak the use case of that a little bit at the moment. It's cool.
So have you started using data prep yet?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, the challenge is we've got a lot of Alteryx instances, so it's now trying to work out how we can slowly make sure that we can satisfy those use cases with Tableau Prep.
What about the subscription licensing? Are you running subscriptions now, or are you doing
No, we're still on the old perpetual
Core.
model, but we're kind of assessing it constantly to see at which point we jump over. I think we're certainly planning to go over. And I think for me, a lot of the announcements this morning around I suppose we were expecting around prep flows being able to go onto server and be scheduled will be that last little bit that we need, because we've got a lot of expensive scheduler licenses at the moment.
So how many cores are you guys running on the server?
We're on an 8 core at the moment.
Or 8 cores?
Yeah, so so the real benefit of subscription is that if we went subscription and then into cloud, is we could just flex
Size.
it based on the need at the time, which is great. Cool. So I think we're pretty much at time, aren't we? So I suppose all that's left to say is thanks very much for coming along, and thanks for having me here. There's some my LinkedIn details are there, email address, and obviously. If you feedback on the app, that'd be really helpful. And I'll probably just hang around outside in the corridor straight after this if anybody's got any further questions they want one-to-one. And I think there's an airline meetup later this week for any of the airline people in the room. I can't remember off the top of my head when it is, but maybe see you there. And if you want to buy me a drink at the data night out, they're free, so it's all good. Come and find me. And and make sure you fly Virgin and not BA. And then we're happy. Thanks, guys.